September the 20th, 1988, a beautiful Tuesday morning in Berlin, New Mexico. 19-year-old Tara Calico kissed her mother goodbye, grabbed her bright pink mountain bike, and headed out for a daily ride along Highway 47. She told her mother she'll be back by noon for lunch. Tara never came home. What happened next will become one of America's most haunting missing person cases, a mystery that spans over 3 decades and centers around a single, terrifying photograph found 1,500 miles away in Florida's parking lot. This photo shows 2 children bound and gagged, staring directly into the camera with eyes full of terror. Next to the girl lies a book, My Sweet Audrina by V.C. Adams, which happened to be Tara's favourite novel. Hey, I'm Boyzila, and today we're investigating the Tara Calico case. After 35 years of dead ends and false leads, authorities announced in 2023 that they finally have enough evidence to pursue some charges. But the biggest question remains, is that terrified girl in the Polaroid really Tara Calico? And if so, what happened to her after that photo was taken? If you're new here, we cover the cases others won't touch, the disappearances, the cover-ups, and the crimes so disturbing they're whispered about more than they're spoken. We drop deep dives every Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday and Friday. No fluff, no filler. So if you're into the real stories that will chill your spine and challenge your sense of what's possible, you're in the right place. Hit that subscribe button so you don't miss a single case. Now, let's jump into this story. To understand what happened to Tara Calico, you need to understand who she was. This wasn't a troubled teenager who might have just run away. This was a young woman with everything to live for. Tara Leigh Calico was born February 28, 1969, in Berlin, New Mexico, a small town of around 7,000 people located 30 miles south of Albuquerque. She was an honor student at the University of New Mexico, studying psychology with dreams of becoming a counselor. Her professors described her as brilliant, dedicated, and compassionate. But Tara's real passion was fitness and the outdoors. She was an avid cyclist who rode the same 36-mile route along New Mexico State Road 47 like every single day, rain or shine, summer or winter. Tara would be out on her bike by 9:30 a.m. cycling through the desert landscape she loved. Her mother, Patty Duell, later said that Tara was almost obsessive about her routine. She needed that ride like other people need coffee, Patty recalled. It was like how she started every day, how she cleared her mind. September the 20th, 1988 started like any other day. Tara woke up early, had breakfast with her family, and prepared for her ride. But something was different that morning. As she headed out the door, Tara turned to her mother and said something she's never said before. "If I'm not back by noon, come looking for me." Those words would haunt Patty Duell for the rest of her life. Tara left home around 9:30 a.m. wearing a bright pink Umbro shirt and black shorts, riding her neon pink Huffer mountain bike. Multiple witnesses actually saw her cycling along her usual route, Highway 47, heading south towards the village of Tome. The last confirmed sighting was around 11:45 a.m. when a motorist spotted Tara about 12 miles from her home. She appeared to be in distress, looking over her shoulder as if someone was following her. Behind her, witnesses reported seeing a light-coloured pickup truck driving unusually close to her bicycle. That was the last time anyone saw Tara Calico alive. When noon came and went and no sign of Tara, Patty Duell knew something was wrong. Her daughter was never late. By 12:30 p.m, Patty was in her car, driving Tara's exact route, searching for any sign of her daughter or her distinctive pink bike. She found nothing. It was as if Tara had just simply vanished into thin air. By 2 p.m. on September the 20th, Patty Duell was at the Valencia County Sheriff's Office filing a missing persons report. The deputy's response was frustratingly typical for 1988. They suggested Tara might have just decided to extend her ride, or maybe she stopped to visit friends. But Patty knew her daughter. Tara would never leave without calling, especially after specifically asking her mother to come looking if she was late. Something terrible had happened. The official search began the next morning, September the 21st. Dozens of volunteers joined law enforcement officers combing through the desert terrain along Highway 47. They used helicopters, search dogs, the teams of officers on horseback. The search area covered over 100 square miles of harsh New Mexico wilderness. What they found was almost nothing. No sign of Tara, no sign of her bike, no physical evidence of what might have happened. It was as if she just simply evaporated. But there were clues, disturbing clues that pointed to something sinister. Multiple witnesses, they came forward with reports of seeing Tara being harassed by occupants of a pickup trucks during the previous rides. Local cyclists reported that young men would deliberately drive close to female cyclists, yelling obscurities and trying to force them off the road. One witness, Lawrence Romario Jr., told police that he had seen Tara on the morning of September the 20th, being followed by a light-coloured pickup truck with two men inside. According to Romario, the truck was driving aggressively close to Tara's bike. She appeared to be frightened. Even more disturbing, police discovered that this wasn't an isolated incident. Several other female cyclists have reported being harassed along the same stretch of Highway 47. The pattern was always the same. Young men in pickup trucks would target lone female cyclists, following them, shouting at them, and sometimes even trying to run them off the road. But harassment was one thing. What happened to Tara suggested something far more sinister. The search continued for weeks, then months. Posters with Tara's smiling face appeared throughout New Mexico and beyond. The FBI joined the investigation. Psychics offered their services. Nothing led to any concrete answers. As 1988 turned to 1989, Calico family faced the heartbreaking reality that Tara may never be found. But then, in July 1989, everything changed. A photograph would surface that would give the case international attention and offer the first potential clue about Tara's fate. But it would also raise questions that remain unanswered more than 30 years later. June the 15th, 1989, nearly 9 months after Tara's disappearance, a woman walking through the parking lot of a convenience store in Port St. Joe, Florida, over 1,500 miles from Tara's disappearance. She spotted something that would change everything. Lying on the asphalt was a Polaroid photograph. The woman almost walked past it, but something made her pick it up and look. What she saw made her blood run cold. The photo showed 2 children, a teenage girl and a younger boy, probably around 10 years old. Both were bound with what appeared to be white rope or tape. Both had duct tape covering their mouths, but it was their eyes that haunted everyone who saw the image. Wide with terror, staring directly into the camera, as if pleading for help. The woman immediately took the photo to local police, who forwarded it to the FBI. Within days, the image was broadcast on national television, appearing on shows like A Current Affair and Unsolved Mysteries. When Patty Duell saw the photograph on television, she immediately called the police. "That's my daughter," she said without hesitation. "That's Tara." And there were compelling reasons to believe she was right. The girl in the photo bore a striking resemblance to Tara Calico. She had that same bone structure, that same hair colour, similar facial features. More importantly, she appeared to have a scar on her leg in the same location where Tara had distinctive scar from a childhood accident. Perhaps the most convincing of all was what appeared next to the girl in the photograph, a paperback book. The title was clearly visible, My Sweet Audrina, by V.C. Andrews. That was Tara's favourite book, one she carried with her everywhere and had been reading just before her disappearance. Also visible in the photo were a plastic cup and what appeared to be a toy squirt gun, items that suggested the children were being held in some kind of recreational vehicle or camper. The FBI immediately launched a massive investigation. The photo was analysed by forensic experts at Scotland Yard, Los Alamos National Laboratory, and the FBI's own crime lab. The results were frustratingly inconclusive. Scotland Yard's analysis concluded that the girl in the photo was indeed Tara Calico. The Los Alamos National Laboratory reached the opposite conclusion, stating that the facial measurements they didn't match. The FBI's analysis fell somewhere in between. They couldn't definitively confirm or rule out that it was Tara, but meanwhile, investigators worked to identify the boy in the photograph. Some believed it might be Michael Henley, a 9-year-old boy who had disappeared while camping with his father in New Mexico's Zuni Mountains in April 1988, 5 months before Tara vanished. Michael's parents were shown the photograph and became convinced it was their son. "I'm always certain that's Michael," his mother said. The boy in the photo had similar features and appeared to be the right age. But this identification would later be proven tragically wrong. In June 1990, hunters found Michael Henley's remains in the Zuni Mountains, not far from where he disappeared. The cause of death was exposure. He had apparently gotten lost while camping and just died of hypothermia. He had never been kidnapped at all. This left investigators back at square one. If the boy wasn't Michael Henley, then who was it? And was the girl really Tara Calico? Or were both children just victims of some other terrible crime? The Port St. Joe's Polaroid, it wasn't the only mysterious photograph connected to the Tara Calico case. Over the years, 2 additional Polaroids would surface, each raising more new questions about Tara's fate. In 1990, another disturbing image appeared. This Polaroid showed a young woman who appeared to be restrained in what looked like the back of a van or RV. The woman's face was partially obscured, but some investigators believed it could be an older Tara Calico. It was less clear than the Port St. Joe image, making positive identification nearly impossible, but it showed similar rope bindings and appeared to be taken in a similar setting, the interior of some kind of vehicle. Then, in 1991, a third photograph was discovered, much closer to where Tara had disappeared, and again, some investigators thought it might be Tara. All 3 photographs shared disturbing similarities: young women bound and apparently held against their will, photographed in what appeared to be mobile settings like RVs or vans. The implication was chilling. These might be trophies taken by a serial kidnapper who moved his victims around the country. But despite extensive investigation, none of the additional photographs could be definitively linked to Tara Calico. The FBI analysed each image for clues about location, timing and identity of the victims, but came up empty. What made the situation even more frustrating was the advances in digital photo analysis. They weren't yet available in the early 1990s. Today's sophisticated facial recognition software and digital enhancement techniques didn't exist when those photographs were first discovered. The photographs did lead to some important developments in the case. They generated hundreds of tips from across the country, as people reported possible sightings of Tara or similar looking women. Several potential suspects were identified and investigated, but each lead ultimately went nowhere. The photographs remained mysterious artifacts, tantalizing clues that seemed to offer no hope of solving the case, which ultimately raised more questions than answers. By the mid-1990s, the trail had gone cold. The FBI continued to receive occasional tips, and the case remained officially open, but there were no active leads. Tara Calico had become another name on the long list of Americans who had just simply vanished without a trace. Patty Duell never gave up hope. she continued her own investigation, hiring private detectives and following up on every possible lead. She appeared on countless television shows, gave interviews to journalists, and maintained a website dedicated to finding her daughter. And slowly, new information began to emerge. While the mysterious Polaroids they captured public attention, law enforcement was quietly building a case based on more traditional investigative methods. Over the years, several suspects emerged, and a clearer picture began to form of what might have happened to Tara Calico. The harassment of female cyclists along Highway 47, it wasn't random. Investigators discovered that it was part of a pattern of escalating criminal behaviour by a group of young local men. These weren't strangers passing through, they were residents of Valencia County who knew the area intimately and had been targeting women for months before Tara disappeared. The prime suspect that emerged was a local man who had been involved in previous incidents of harassing cyclists. According to witnesses, this individual had been seen following female cyclists in a light-coloured pickup truck, matching the description of the vehicle seen behind Tara on the morning she disappeared. But building a case against any suspect proved difficult. This wasn't 1988, before DNA evidence was widely used, before cell phone tracking, before the digital surveillance networks that help solve crimes today. The case relied on witness testimonies, much of it from years after the fact, and physical evidence that just simply didn't exist. What investigators did have was a growing understanding of the probable sequence of events. Based on Whitman's statements and the timeline of Tara's disappearance, they believed she was likely abducted sometime between 11:45 AM and noon on September 20th, 1988. The theory was that one or more individuals in a pickup truck had been following Tara, waiting for her to reach an isolated section of Highway 47. When she was far enough away from any witnesses or help, they forced her off the road and abducted her. What happened next remained a mystery. Was Tara taken to a nearby location and killed immediately? Was she held captive for some period of time? Did the mysterious Polaroids really show her months or years after her disappearance? One particularly disturbing theory was that Tara had been sold into human trafficking. The Polaroids, if they really showed Tara, suggested she might have been transported across the country and held captive for an extended period. This would explain why her body has never been found in the New Mexico desert, where most investigators initially focused their search. Another theory was that Tara was killed shortly after her abduction, and her body was hidden in a remote location where it's just never been discovered. The vast wilderness areas around Berlin, New Mexico include thousands of acres of desert, canyons and mountain terrain where a body could remain hidden indefinitely. A third possibility was that Tara was taken to a secondary location, possibly out of the state, where she was held captive before eventually being killed. This theory was supported by the discovery of the Polaroids in Florida and other distinct locations. All of these theories remain just that, theories. Despite decades of investigation, law enforcement has been unable to prove what happened to Tara Calico or to bring charges against any suspects. But that changed in 2023. June the 13th, 2023, 35 years after Tara Calico's disappearance, Valencia County Sheriff Denise Vigil called a press conference that would make national news. "I personally was not sure I would ever see the day of significant breakthrough," Sheriff Vigil announced, "but I stand before you confident of the findings in this case." After more than 3 decades, investigators believed they had finally enough evidence to pursue criminal charges in the Tara Calico case. At this time, law enforcement believes there is significant evidence to submit this investigation to the District Attorney's Office for review of potential charges. The identities and specifics of the persons of interest are sealed by the court and will remain so until a court order otherwise. The announcement was both thrilling and frustratingly vague. Investigators revealed that they had identified multiple suspects, at least 2 primary perpetrators and possibly 2 accomplices, but they couldn't name these individuals or reveal what evidence had led to the breakthrough. What we do know is that the investigation had been reinvigorated in recent years with new technology and fresh eyes on old evidence. Cold case investigators have been reviewing the entire file, re-interviewing witnesses, and applying modern forensic techniques to evidence that had been collected decades earlier. Sheriff Vigil revealed that a search warrant had been executed at a Valencia County residence a few years before the announcement, though the details of what was found remained sealed. This suggested that investigators had identified a specific suspect and gathered enough evidence to obtain a warrant. The breakthrough also involved cooperation between multiple law enforcement agencies. The FBI, which had maintained jurisdiction over the case due to its potential interstate nature, worked closely with local authorities. The Rocky Mountain Information Network, a regional crime-fighting consortium, providing additional resources and expertise. Perhaps most importantly, investigators revealed that they believe they now understood what happened to Tara Calico on that September morning in 1988. According to law enforcement sources who spoke anonymously to reporters, the current theory is that Tara was abducted by at least 2 teenage boys from the local community, possibly acting with accomplices. These individuals have been involved in pattern of harassment targeting female cyclists, and their behaviour has escalated to kidnapping and murder. The sources suggested that Tara was likely killed shortly after abduction, rather than being held captive for an extended period. This would contradict the theory that the mysterious Polaroids actually showed Tara months or years after her disappearance. If this theory is correct, it would mean that Port St. Joe Polaroid, despite its eerie similarities to Tara's appearance and the presence of her favourite book, actually shows 2 other victims of an unrelated crime. This would explain why forensic analysis of the photo has been so inconclusive. Even in the recent breakthrough of the Tara Calico investigation, the mysterious Polaroid photograph remains one of the most haunting pieces of evidence in the case, and there are aspects of this photo that investigators have never been able to explain. The presence of "My Sweet Audrina" in the photograph is the detail that convinced many people, including Tara's mother, that the girl indeed was Tara. But skeptics point out that this book was a bestseller in the late 1980s. Millions of copies were sold, and it was particularly popular among teenage girls. The fact that it appears in the photo could just be a coincidence. However, other details in the photograph are harder to dismiss. The girl's physical resemblance to Tara is striking, including what appears to be a scar in this same location where Tara had a distinctive mark on her leg. The facial structure, the hair colour, and general appearance all match Tara's description. But modern digital analysis had revealed something troubling about the identification. Advanced facial recognition software, which wasn't available in 1989, has cast doubt on whether the girl in the photo is really Tara Calico. The facial measurements don't match as closely as they appear to the naked eye. This has led some investigators to conclude that the Polaroid is a tragic red herring. A photograph of 2 other victims who appeared to bear a superficial resemblance to Tara Calico and who were photographed near her favourite book by pure coincidence. But if this is true, it raises even more disturbing questions. Who are the 2 children in the photograph? What happened to them? And why has this case never been solved? The FBI maintains an active investigation into the identity of the children in Port St. Joe's Polaroid. They've compared it to thousands of missing person cases from the 80s and the 1990s, but have never been able to definitively identify either victim. This suggests that either these children were never reported missing, or that these were victims of a crime that occurred outside of USA. Some investigators theorise that the photo might show victims of international human trafficking, which would explain why they don't match any American missing person cases. Another possibility is that the children in the photo were murdered shortly after the image was taken, and their bodies were disposed of in a way that prevented discovery. The photo might be the only evidence that these crimes ever occurred. The location where the photo was found, Port St. Joe, Florida, has never been satisfactorily explained. Why would a photo connected to New Mexico disappearance turn up 1,000 miles away in a Florida parking lot? This detail supports the theory that Tara was taken across state lines, but it also complicates the investigation enormously. Port St. Joe is a small coastal community on Florida's Gulf Coast, known primarily for tourism and fishing. It's not a place where major criminal networks would typically operate, which makes this discovery of the photo there even more puzzling. As of 2024, more than a year after Cheryl Vigil's announcement, no charges have been filed in the Tara Calico case. The investigation remains with the district attorney's office, where prosecutors are reportedly reviewing the evidence to determine if charges can be brought. This delay is frustrating for Tara's family and the many people who have followed this case for decades, but it's also understandable given the complexity of prosecuting a crime that occurred 36 years ago. The passage of time creates enormous challenges for prosecutors. Witnesses die or develop memory problems, physical evidence degrades or gets lost, and legal standards change. What might have seemed to be a strong case in 1988 might not meet today's requirement for proof beyond a reasonable doubt. There's also the question of whether the identified suspects are still alive and competent to stand trial. If the perpetrators were teenagers in 1988, they would be in their 50s now. Some may have just died, others may have developed health problems that would complicate prosecution, but advances in forensic technologies also provide new opportunities to solve old cases. DNA analysis, which was in its infancy in 1988, can now extract useful information from tiny samples that would have been useless decades ago. Digital enhancement of photographs and other evidence can reveal details that were previously invisible. If charges are eventually filed and suspects are brought to trial, it would represent a victory not just for Tara's family, but for all the families of missing persons whose cases have gone unsolved for decades. Patty Duell, Tara's mother, lived to see the 2023 breakthrough announcement, though she passed away in recent years after a lifetime of searching for her daughter. Her dedication to finding the truth about Tara's disappearance inspired countless other families facing similar tragedies. The case also highlighted the vulnerability of women exercising alone in remote areas. Tara's disappearance led to increased awareness of the dangers faced by female athletes and prompted many communities to establish safer routes and better reporting systems for harassment. But perhaps most importantly, the Tara Calico case demonstrates that some mysteries may never be fully solved. Even if prosecutors eventually bring charges against suspects, even if convictions are obtained, we may never know for certain what happened to Tara on that September morning in 1988. The Tara Calico case, it represents both the best and the worst of America's approach to missing person investigations. The worst, how a young woman could disappear in broad daylight on a well-travelled highway and just leave virtually no trace. How the investigation could languish for decades with no arrests despite strong suspects and compelling evidence. But it also represents the best, how law enforcement agencies just never gave up, how new technology has been applied to old evidence, how a community refused to forget a victim even after 35 years. As we wait to see if charges will finally be filed in this case, the mystery of the Polaroid photo, it continues to haunt everyone who encounters it. Those two terrified faces staring out from a 35-year-old instant photo, they represent more than just potential evidence in one case. They represent all the victims of crime that remain unsolved, all the families still searching for answers, all the questions that may never be fully answered. Whether the girl in that photo really is Tara Calico or some other victim, her silent plea for help continues to echo across the decades. And until someone is held accountable for what happened to Tara and to whoever those children in the Polaroid really were, the case will remain one of America's most disturbing unsolved mysteries. What do you think happened to Tara Calico? Do you believe the girl in the Polaroid really is her? Let me know in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe to Boyzilla for more investigations into the cases that continue to baffle law enforcement. The search for truth continues, and sometimes that's all the justice we can hope for.